Hello, and welcome to the 74th episode of NEOHUMAN podcast. I'm Agava Hari, etologist on Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow the show on liveinlimbo.com, iTunes, YouTube, BitChute, and a whole bunch of other places. And today, in the series of Welcoming Back Friends, I'm welcoming back the third guest, I believe, of the podcast, and my dear friend in Canada, Randall Willis, also known as Randy. Welcome, man. Welcome back.
Hey, good to see you. It's been a while.
Has it been? Yeah, since summer, I guess.
Yeah. I remember when we had those.
So what's been going on?
What's been going on? Well, rumor has it there's a global pandemic happening.
They're saying something.
My apartment.
Yeah.
It's much like what's going on in the background from what I can tell.
Well, I have to again show it for our viewers because people are not going to see this. Unfortunately, the final product, they're going to see it now that I switched. Again, this glorious background is by Beeple Crap. It's completely free and available. Just go to Beeple Crap Instagram, and there's a link. And the man's a genius. And this is supposed to be a COVID killer that you just go inside of it and be secure doing your Zoom stuff without getting infected. So, what do you think about this? Before getting into this virus stuff, let's remind those of our audience who are not familiar with you that who you are, the lives you've lived, the work you've done, and what are you mainly focused on now these days?
Well, I'd argue on that very last question. I'm not focused on anything. I'm more blurry.
Very zen.
Yeah, it's so basically my background, to give you a really quick resume, was I have a master's degree in protein biochemistry, studied here in Toronto, worked at the Hospital for Sick Children doing research into things like cystic fibrosis and protein structure, and basically was a bench jockey for probably about 10 or 15 years, getting into the basics, the fundamentals of biochemistry, biomedicine, that type of thing. And that eventually led me into a career in science writing. Science is so much more fun to talk about than it is to do, or at least in my opinion. And so the great thing about science writing, and that's kind of what I've been doing predominantly for the last almost 20 years, is I get to research everything. I get to talk to everybody. Again, mostly on the biomedical side of things, but I've even done chemistry, physics, informatics, all those types of fields I've talked about and written about. And the fun there is in interviewing people, it's about becoming just stupid enough to ask really good questions. Not so oblivious that you can't even ask questions, and not so expert that you don't need to ask questions. Just stupid enough.
Right.
And I specialize in being just stupid enough. And that's pretty much been a lifestyle. So, working for several years and continuing to do writing feature articles for magazines and surveying the biopharma landscape and biotech. I've also trained as a sketch and improv comedian. Studied here in Toronto at Second City, plug for them, as well as several other comedy centers, because Toronto is the center of the universe for comedy. And I actually believe that. Canadians are weird. But yeah, studied comedy, studied storytelling. That's led me to a career as a screenwriter. I've had screenplays win awards at different competitions. I teach screenwriting here in Toronto and have been working on screenplays for television. I've got a documentary series that I think would be really interesting.
What is that about?
The documentary series, I call it Worlds. And basically, to give you a bit of a background, maybe my barroom pitch is I'm an addict since I've been a child. I'm an addict to nature documentary series. If you show me a walrus skittering its big belly across the beach, I'll watch you. Doesn't really matter what you tell me. But the problem is in my mid 50s now, I've seen so many nature documentaries that it's hard for you to surprise me. as a documentarian, as someone creating these shows, BBC Earth, the big names. And so, if you show me a Komodo dragon, I can probably tell you its name because I've seen all of them. If you show me a dolphin swimming in relatively shallow water, my first instinct is to go, oh, this is the one where the dolphins work as a team and surround and sort of herd a school of fish by agitating the mud, and then they pounce on the fish when they've concentrated them. And so, as much as I still love these documentaries, as much as I still admire the people that make them, and the cinematography that goes into it, and the storytelling, because that's what I do, I wanted to do something different. But it was like, where else could we go? And the whole space background that you had kind of fits into that, because there's an entire universe, fictional though it may be, in science fiction, of other worlds, other planets.
For those of our audience who will end up just listening to this episode, by space background, Randy's talking about the literal Zoom background, not that I have background in space in any. Well, I believe that I'm an alien, but that's a state of mind. So
I spent a lot of time with you. I'm okay with that definition.
I mean, why not? But in the academic sense, fortunately, I don't have a background in anything.
Yeah, that's okay. Academia is overrated, and we can talk about that if you want. But so the idea was that what if I wrote a documentary series, a nature documentary series, but using these fictional worlds, using these fictional planets like Arrakis from the novel Dune, or ice planets, or volcanic planets, or whatever, megalopolises, and really go in and say, okay, yes, this is a fictional world, but science fiction is about exploring science beyond the limits of what we can measure right now.
Right.
And so there is a legitimate science behind the best science fiction. And so it's about getting scientists, anthropologists, geologists, meteorologists of all disciplines, basically, to speculate, to say what would be the science behind that. Can you have a completely desert planet? And how does the hydrologic cycle work? How does that environment influence the evolution of the creatures that live on that planet and the societies that develop there? And so that's kind of what I've been working on.
That would be a very cool idea to have a forum, like a platform. So, you just introduce the first, I guess, idea, you plant a seed, and just watch it grow from there. And, I guess Reddit, something like Reddit would be the closest to what I'm describing, that then you let the community decide which description, which idea would be cooler, or they relate to it better, more on the basis of voting, thumb up, thumb down. Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the thing is I think there's so many potential layers to this thing, of having the online communities, of having educational modules, because, I mean, again, science fiction allows us to ask the questions that are too uncomfortable in reality, right? Too uncomfortable in our daily lives. So we speculate through science fiction. Well, the good ones. Yeah, the good ones. But even a lot of the bad ones are based on someone's crappy life.
Well, I think
all good writing comes from having a crappy life.
Right. Well, a kind of a challenge, right? Because it's through that challenge that you have the opportunity to look within yourself and realize who you are and discover more aspects of yourself. And I think it's so important right now to talk about those kind of things, but at the same time, we're dealing with cancel culture, that certain things cannot be said. But I think we are moving beyond that, because, we are experiencing some very real things. For example, the border kind of situation keep coming up when we're talking about in this era of COVID, that it's very hard to imagine that for the unforeseeable future, somebody will come up and make a valid political argument that is on the basis of open borders. Because people remember that, oh, well, we need to have some kind of a control over who's coming inside the country because of pandemic, right? And it is because of the changes so dramatic that very dramatic opportunities also arise. And I think in the context of science fiction right now, the most important thing we can talk about and we should talk about is ethics and morality.
Mhm.
That, all right, a lot of what science fiction writers have been talking about, a lot of it have come true. Whether it's that, it was inspired by what they were writing and talking about, or they could just foresee because of this pattern that is, evolving and growing all the time on an exponential kind of a basis, this is where we're going to be.
Yep.
But right now, we have no idea that what is it that have kept us together beyond the limit on information, creation and distribution of information that our parents relied on, very few, or you when you were a child, or me when I was a child, on very limited numbers of information. And that all of that has changed. So this lack of objectivity, of ethics and morality and values and everything that glue us together, that is, people are like, they're decreasing, but they never existed. It's just the illusion of it that we kind of, assume to be together because of it.
It's funny, the number of times I've heard over the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years about the people talking about the good old days of news, the Walter Cronkite era, right? And how news used to be objective, and it used to be, you could trust it, and now it's just all over the map. And it's like, well, okay, I didn't know Cronkite specifically. I mean, I saw him on the news. He seemed like a trusted grandfatherly figure, so I'm not going to assume he was lying to me. But by the same token, news has always been subjective.
Yeah.
News has always had a perspective. You go back to what was it, the Spanish Civil War, and Hemingway being a journalist, he says, putting up air quotes, because Hemingway was an amazing storyteller, and so if nothing was happening, he made shit up.
Yeah, and why not?
Right? And so it was, and the news empires back then, they were also empires. They were about selling newspapers. They were about creating controversy. They were about having a perspective. And I mean, there was the ultra right leaning and the right leaning, because I don't know that there was much of a left back in the day, back in the early part of the 20th century, and forget prior. Now it's the same thing. I mean, we've got left-leaning news, we've got right-leaning news, but it's still about sales, right? This isn't to say I'm completely jaded and don't believe that people are trying to tell stories as they understand it, but it's about to I think, in a large extent, what the point you were trying to make is, we have to make decisions for ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we choose to only live in an echo chamber, that's a choice. Goodness knows I've been probably as guilty as the next person of, at times in my life, living in an echo chamber where I only heard the news I wanted to hear, where I only took in the information that fit my theory.
Yeah, because that's a safe place. And
it's a totally safe place.
It's more than just a choice. It becomes a matter of necessity, because it goes back when, and this is the era that I believe we are entering, that religions will keep coming back, not in the traditional sense of them or conventional sense of them, but communities and excuses for people to hold on to something that they can identify with, because all of that is going out of the window. Everything is debatable. There is no value that, for example, the father figure in a family can carry on for the next 50 years. It's just not going to happen. People have the opportunity to create and share information, and why wouldn't they do it? And it's like the most liberating thing. Companies have become trillionaires because of this excitement of, hey, I want to be heard.
Yep.
And this is where we are. And this left and right thing, which I think all of it is becoming irrelevant. At the end of the day, it really is about, do you want bigger state to take care of you, or do you want to have more responsibilities as an individual and therefore deal with the consequences of those responsibilities? And I think this is the argument that is not going to end anytime soon, because a lot of people, they want to be taken care of. And a lot of people are like, I'm not going to trust a centralized structure of authority, and quite correctly, because it's corruptible.
Well, and I think actually it was funny. I was commenting to a friend about this on Twitter earlier today. I think I think responsibility is the key there, because I think it's about, what I posted online, and people are welcome to disagree with me on this, was personal freedom in the absence of responsibility is social tyranny.
Right.
And I think this is the thing. I think for a lot of people, a lot of people who are against big government and the government being a nanny state, and God knows I live in Canada, there are those.
Canada's gone, man. Canada's gone. Good God.
The checks are coming out. But the flip side to that is there are a lot of people who believe in big industry and believe that big industry will save their lives.
Right.
Or the American dream, and God knows you'll probably get a response to this one, of this concept that I can achieve anything. And so therefore I make decisions based on when I'm rich, not where I am now. And I assume that something will help me make that happen.
And those kind of people have been outsmarted by, for example, credit card companies.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a bad or a wrong thing. It's just a natural hierarchy of, if you're greedy and dumb, there's a very good chance that you end up in a worse place 10 years down the road than you were right now.
Oh yeah, totally.
Why shouldn't it be that way though? That's the thing.
That's the thing. Like it's this whole idea of thinking multiple thoughts at the same time, which usually gives me a headache. It's something I've been working on over the years, because I used to be very strong, and to some extent I am still strongly on the side of a central government that represents us, this illusion, this whatever you want to call it,
even by force.
Well, and that becomes the problem, right? That becomes the question,
because that's inevitable.
But that's the thing. But force is there regardless of whether it's run by a government or run by industry.
but those two are not the only two options. Those
True.
two
there,
might
there
be
is there is individual agency, but very few people, until pressed, are going to exercise individual agency.
No, but also there is freedom of association and form your own communities.
Yeah.
And now we have the technology and means and reason to do exactly that. That, let's say, a hippie colony wants to be formed, or a religious community, or whatever wants to be formed in the middle of nowhere. They come up with their own currency, cryptocurrency, that is not backed by a central bank, and they start trading among each other using that currency.
Mm-hmm.
We have all the technology and all the way that can be achieved. A self-sustained community in the middle of nowhere, where land is cheap. They come together based on their shared opinion, not the one that is being forced upon them by some state or religion or corporation or even a family.
But again, it becomes, and I don't disagree with you, but the challenge I think there is, it still is about our social conditioning up to this point.
Yeah, but there's nothing we can do about that.
Because there is, but I mean, it's just one of those things you have to be conscious of and make decisions as you go along, right? As a group, as an organization, as this community that you're describing. And it's about, how do you want it to work? How do you want it to function? How big do you want it to be?
You don't even need to think about any of that. You just focus on survival, meaning you need water, food, and air, and focus on creation.
Who's responsible on getting the food?
You're responsible to grow your own food or
Oh, so
go
it's not
and,
actually a community. It's just individualism.
well, individualism in a large pieces of land that is not, because right now, and I'm talking about this because of an idea that I came up with. I talked about this. Maybe I talked to you about it. No, I did not talk to you about it.
I don't think so.
So the idea is there are large pieces of land here in the US that is in the middle of nowhere. And by large and relatively cheap, I'm talking about like 10 acres for like $20,000, for example. They're in
Okay.
Florida, Colorado, all over the place. You get those lands and start putting tiny houses in it and bring people who create, artists. Now, you can do this for a whole bunch of different groups of people, but I'm focusing on artists, and not only artists, but creative type. That instead of looking for a place to rent and deal with your roommate or an asshole landlord that is charging you, like the room that I had in Toronto, I had a blast in it, but I was paying like $600 for a single room just because I live in Toronto.
Yep.
Okay, great, but you don't have to do that. You can pay like half of it and have a bigger land. You can plant your food, collect your rainwater, plant whatever kind of legal plants that you want, and create. Focus on whatever it is that you're doing. And you can't understand me because I think you skip over your marketing job, but you left a very well-paid job just to focus on your creativity.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that was a conscious decision. I was doing very well for myself. And I wasn't happy.
Yeah. And there are millions
I
of
wasn't
people like
fulfilled.
that.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, I agree with you. Anybody can do that. But there's still, even in doing that, I'm still doing jobs that pay more money than just the creative thing so that I can afford to eat
But that's
and I
a
can afford a
choice.
roof. And
Yeah.
totally a choice.
That's your
Yeah.
priorities.
Yeah,
You
that's
don't
my
need
priority.
any of them at the end of the day. But that is something that, it really is my perspective. It's not objective whatsoever. The whole
Yeah.
idea of, you get what you need and make with what you have, whatever you can, wherever you are. It doesn't matter. Right? Because there's
Well, and
no
yeah.
scale of good and bad. I need a little more of this to achieve a little closer to this objective, and if I don't have enough, then my work isn't going to be good enough. You know what I mean? It's just
Yep.
you create, therefore it is, and therefore you are.
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so much of my mission right now for myself is to experience the things I'm passionate about, to revel and waller in everything that I love doing. To make choices based on whether or not something's going to interfere with what I love doing. And
Yeah.
so it's very individualistic. It's about me. I don't necessarily advocate it to anybody else. But what's been interesting is, and this has been probably the last 8 years of my life, and I'm alone. Like, I'm divorced and no kids. And so, that definitely that changes my choices. I won't say it makes them easier, but it changes my choices, probably, I assume. But that's the great thing, is I can try things, I can experiment, I can do things. And if I need to, I've got the skill set to go back and do the things I don't like doing, but that give me money. But even that becomes, as you said, that becomes a choice. If I want to go to Paris this fall, assuming airfare is open again, or the airlines are open again, I have to figure out how to make that happen. And so those are choices I make. What do I want? Am I willing to do what I have to do to get it? And sometimes the answer is no, I'm not willing to do what I need to do to go do that. So what else can I do? What else am I interested in? And it's a series of choices, right?
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of friends who are coming out of, in their more in their 40s and 50s, who are getting to the point now where they're like, okay, I've lived this life. I've checked off all the social requirement boxes. I've got the house in the suburbs. I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other thing. And they're miserable,
Yeah.
right? That you focus so much energy.
I mean, why wouldn't
Something,
they be miserable? The life that majority of people live is always in expectation of something that is coming. Always.
always.
So everything is a chore until you get to a point that you've been looking forward to. And then you're like, not only I don't feel better, I feel like I wasted 25, 30 years of my life. And the bright ones get to that point because, it's not late. That can be the moment that you enter the path of liberation to realize that none of it mattered.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and again, it's for me, it's about not worrying too much about what happens tomorrow. It's about like just finding moments of joy in what I'm experiencing now and minimizing moments of discomfort.
Yeah.
Recognizing I can't do 100%, or at least I've not achieved it yet. But that's the thing. It's about really going like, why are you doing this? And so many people don't ask that question, except possibly for society, Western society, North American society, at least the English speaking part of it. And because I won't ever speak for Mexico because I don't understand,
Yeah.
like I don't know Mexico. But Western society is very much about, this is what you do. Then you get to this point in your life and you get a job, and the job, you're in your job for your life, right? And that's fallen away over the last 30 years. People
Oh,
are no
absolutely.
longer lifers for companies, right? Because
Absolutely.
companies aren't lifers for themselves,
Yeah.
or their investors for that matter. And so I think what's been happening is a lot of that mythology that we built up. If you do this, this is the outcome. If you do this, this is the outcome. So there's this pressure on a lot of people, and I think my generation was probably the ones that struggled with it a lot. And then someone from your generation is coming in and going, what the hell? There's nothing here for me, right?
Yeah.
Again, that tiny apartment room for a lot of money. And it's like, but you promised me.
Right.
We bought this social pact that if this happens, therefore that happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's how also they get the kids with student loan.
Oh yeah,
That early, which if you think about it, from a mature kind of a perspective, it's like it should be criminal the way that they sell it to you, and the way that basically they bully you into, hey, this is what you have to get, and you have to get it right now.
yeah.
And fortunately, some people are saying, oh, our education system is falling apart. I'm so happy about all of it falling apart because it's not functional. It's not efficient and corrupt to the bone.
Well, it's also based on a century and a half of development of trying to make cogs for a machine.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the problem. And that's where I balked eventually, which is also why I'm not hyper on education. If you want to go to school and you want to learn about stuff, and I'm like really support, hell, I'm a teacher. Right? Like I teach people who want to understand screenwriting and storytelling better. And I'm all in favor of that, right? If you want to learn how to build a rocket ship, I'm all in favor of that. I am going to be completely useless to you personally. But if you're going to college, if you're going to university to have a career that will last you a lifetime, oh my God, you have so totally been lied to, and you're going to be so disappointed.
Yeah.
Because there are no lifelong careers anymore unless you make it yourself.
Well, my understanding is that big universities have also turned into religions, in a sense that there is a status quo that is set, and a very small circle of people at the top that they determine who gets the grant, what topic is being discussed, what PhD candidates subject is being approved. So it's not that it is a platform to seek knowledge or to improve your understanding of the world. It's a business.
Yeah. Oh, it's
And
totally a business.
fortunately, it's falling apart because you don't rely anymore on the budget or a grant or whatever that some asshole has to confirm. If you can suck his dick or if he can, get money out of you or something. Which is a very human thing. If you're in the position of authority, most likely you're going to corrupt that position in one way or another. Right, but
Yeah, yeah.
all of this is becoming very obvious now.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Like I'm with you. I'm happy to see that the educational system is breaking down.
Yeah.
That the facade is dropping. And so people have a better chance to see how the sausage is being made, because guess what? You're the sausage.
Yeah, there's an
You're the
alternative.
one that's being ground up and stuffed into a tube.
Absolutely, and there's an
Yeah.
alternative for it now, which is online education. Now it's
Yeah.
in its early days and years, but there's no reason that we carry on with something that is so expensive, so inefficient. And when you're talking about the United States, I don't blame guns for school shootings and all that. We can talk about it if you want, but I do blame the fucking schools and police departments and mental health and all. There's so many different things that can be improved to protect these kids, but it's not being done because that's the nature of the business. Just spend on whatever you can get as much as you possibly can out of, and forget about the rest until something happens, and then overspend. It's just insane.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's that aspect of spending money when enough people are screaming at you, but only when enough people are screaming at you.
And as much as you can just shut them up, nothing
Yeah,
more.
that's what the money's for, is to basically placate the mob. But that's the thing. Like I think that becomes the next part of the challenge, though, is as formal education undergoes a metamorphosis of some sort, and these other sources of education, self-education, guilds, collectives, whatever they happen to be, then the system for people on the other end of finding employment, assuming they want to, as opposed to making self-employment and figuring out how to develop survival skills. There's still a demand for degrees when you apply for a lot of jobs, right?
Right.
Whether it's a bachelor's, a master's, an MBA, whatever. Well, that system's broken too. So years ago when I worked at another hospital here in Toronto, Mount Sinai, which is a great institute of research and learning, and it's a great place to go if you're unwell. It's a wonderful hospital. I don't want to denigrate it in that sense, but I was in a management position, so I had to go for management training. And one of the things we talked about was, when you're hiring someone, being careful that subliminal bias doesn't come into your decision making, which I thought was funny. But yeah, sure, be more conscious. I'm okay with that. But they were talking about, like, even when you're describing a position, be careful what degrees you're asking for, because that degree may not be necessary for that job. It's just that's the way it's always been done.
Right.
Which was, again, I completely agree with. Some of my favorite jobs have come from quirky asks that had nothing to do with my formal background. But one of the things I challenged the HR manager with was, it's like, yeah, because I totally agree with that, because to be a university professor, it's ridiculous that they demand you have a PhD. And it was funny to see her turn 180 degrees, because she was like, well, no, but you need a PhD to be a professor at a university. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You need to understand the science. You need to know what you're teaching. But there's nothing in the training of a PhD scientist that tells you anything about teaching.
Right.
Lots of professors
It's like a secret society
really bad
initiation.
at what they do.
It's like a secret. Yeah. It's like a secret society initiation.
Yeah. But again, it's that collective social thing compact that we bought into, which said that a PhD scientist is the only one who can explain high-end science to a group of undergraduates. And it's like, no, I don't have any formal training in screenwriting. I've taken some courses, but ultimately what I teach, what I write, is what I find online. I self-educated. I
Yeah.
talk to a lot of writers because my way of doing it is not the only way of doing it. God, I don't want you to do it my way necessarily. And so I amalgamate information and I dole it out in a way that my students respond really well to. I will brag. My students like going through my courses. I've only had a few people who weren't happy. And it's about again, it gets back to the passion, right? I could teach at the university level. I could be a professor in a lot of fields right now because you know what? That's what I do for the magazine. I write articles for people to understand what the science is and how it works and how it relates and how it's used and what its potential is. A really good professor is going to do exactly that, you know, because it's science is constantly evolving in particular, right? I'm not teaching and arithmetic as opposed to mathematics. Arithmetic where, you know, it's just about pattern recognition and 2 times 2 is 4. Up until this point, 2 times 2 has been 4. I haven't heard any data that suggests it's different. So we're going to teach 2 times 2 is 4. Whereas cell biology is constantly evolving. Our understanding of it, that is. The biology's there. It's just we're stupid.
And I think that's a very good argument against that centralized government that you were in favor of. Because it's very true that fields of science and any field is evolving. If it's not evolving, it's not a good field because, you know, what is the point of a stale thing in this world and reality that everything is fluid and evolving at all times? But a centralized government itself is formed around certain kind of principles that, just like with religion, they remain unchanged because nature of the business is conservative. Just keep focusing, not conservative, not politically, but conservative in a sense that for as long as it's working, keep focusing on it until it's dry.
All collections of people are that, though, in my experience.
Yeah, but we don't have to rely on one centralized structure of authority. Like, look at Canada. Mm-hmm. I watched the Canadian election last October live, and it's just insane. They barely had left Ontario starting counting the votes from somewhere. They went through 3 eastern provinces, and already they made a decision that, hey, this is who's going to be the minority, who's going to be the other minority. This is the dynamic that is spread. I mean, it's clearly a rigged system in favor of the East because more people ended up living in downtown Toronto and downtown Montreal. And surprise, surprise, they get the most of everything in Canada, but forget about everyone else.
The only reason it isn't that way in the States is because California's got such a high population. But
electoral college.
But it still doesn't matter.
Well, because the constitution of this country is supposed to be way more decentralized than it is right now. Federal government it needs to be way more.
It's more decentralized than Canada is what I meant.
By design.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a democracy, thank goodness. This is
a republic.
It's a constitutional republic.
Yep.
Right? But even here, it goes back to, why do you have to be bound with Republicans or fucking Democrats? You know, that's one of the biggest appeal of Trump, that I look at him as a psychedelic. But a lot of people who are not looking at him as a psychedelic, looking at him as someone who's disrupting the shit out of the system, shaking the hell out of it. Right? But in Canada, for example, people seem to be way too comfortable that, no, you know, Trudeau is a nice guy.
You know, and I don't have a problem with that, again, because I'm here and I drank the Kool-Aid on that one. And I love a minority government. I love a minority government because it's the closest you get, aside from what's happening right now with the pandemic.
I mean, it's a minority government in Canada that is ruling as a majority because the opposition is the most pathetic opposition in the Western world, being the conservative government.
And also because
Conservative Party.
They're taking advantage of COVID.
For sure, everybody do.
Yeah, no, yes. But I'm just saying, in Canada, that's the only reason it's not functioning as a typical minority government in Canada.
And also, I understand the position of the Conservative Party. I think what they're doing is despicable and disgusting, that they're giving up on all their values in order to win an electoral victory. But with that system, what else are they going to do?
Yep.
Downtown Montreal and downtown Toronto is going to determine the future direction of Canada for as long as this electoral system exists. That's why Alberta want to separate, or Saskatchewan want to separate.
And Quebec has wanted to separate. BC's wanted to separate. Ontario said, "Go fuck yourself" at some point.
So how much
Everybody's
longer
like,
can this go on like this? That's the thing.
for actually, honestly, for a long time. And the reason why is exactly what you were talking about before, is because Canadians have bought it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like years ago when I was younger, and Quebec was always threatening to separate, right? And they came close a couple times. I used to worry about that a lot when I was in my teens and my 20s, and it suddenly occurred to me, I don't even know what the moment was that triggered it, but it suddenly occurred to me that even if Quebec had said yes, no one had a clear idea as to what yes meant, because it wasn't going to be, no one was talking about a hard close on the borders. No one was talking about Quebec having its own currency. Nobody was talking about Quebec losing all the federal government jobs. Nobody was talking about, changing what weird rules we have on trade between provinces. It suddenly occurred to me that even if they voted yes, we were then going to spend 30 years negotiating.
But why is that a good thing, though? If they want to separate, why can't they separate right away?
Well, they could, but
like,
none of them
obviously,
wanted to.
all of these obstacles are in front of someone who wants to separate.
Yes.
I think Brexit was the greatest crash course in realizing that they don't give a damn about the referendum. If you're dealing with a bigger power, in that case being the European Union, they will throw anything they can in front of you just so you can't separate. Obviously, the federal government in Canada will throw anything they can in front of somebody who wants to separate. Same thing with the United States. I had a man, a venture capitalist, very well known, Tim Draper, who wanted to split California into three and run each on blockchain. And the guy is like 20, 30 years ahead of the lawmakers and legislators in California. He's supposed to collect, I think, 700,000 signatures. He collected like 200,000 more than that.
Right.
But the Supreme Court of California, 6 people, they threw it out. I'm like, no, we don't even want to give any attention to this. So basically completely unconstitutional and undemocratic. But there was nothing he could do about it.
Right. But again, you don't live in a democracy, so.
No, but what is the point of just, keeping everybody together by force? And I think this is what's changing right now in a very dramatic kind of a way. That's why you're seeing, for example, Trudeau is like, oh, I'm going to bail out the media, eligible media, $650 billion, $1 million, sorry, Canadian dollars.
Yeah, this is
Canadian. This is Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do bees. We don't, and I don't even know that we control a T if we combined all our money.
Well, yeah, Canada's GDP, I think, is 1.7 trillion, something.
Oh,
like
there
that.
you go. We made the
GDP.
T. Yeah.
Yeah. But they want to shut down people who make commentary videos on YouTube, because people don't trust the media, people don't trust the academia, people don't trust the government, and now they have ways that they can communicate with each other.
Well, and they don't even trust each other.
No, they don't. They don't. And, that's what I mean. That new form of religions and groups and all of this is forming for people to make sense out of what is going on, because nobody knows what's going on.
There's always going to be someone who presents an ideology, and it may be you, not you specifically, but the royal you, who presents an ideology that other people are like, yeah, I could live by that.
Yeah, good enough.
And I think that's the origin, right? Like, again, think about even the foundation of the United States. It was based on people who said, fuck that, I'm not taking that, and left.
Yep.
And then form their own, over the next 200 and plus years, form their own hierarchical system that now people are like, fuck that, I'm leaving that.
Yeah.
You yourself left a scenario like that when you left Iran, right? And so it's and again, I think that's partly also one of the big differences. And I discussed this with Leela, who's my ex, who's American by birth, now has
shout out to Leela.
Shout out to Leela. I'll let her know. Thank you. And we were talking about this, and it was like, the United States was founded on the principle of fuck you, you can't treat me like that.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas Canada was founded on the this is nice. This is okay. I like it here. This is good. It's a little cold, but you know what? We'll make it through. Yeah. And so it's about, so the attitude about coming to Canada or living in Canada is very much more like a, it's okay, just don't make too much of a fuss. Yeah. Right? To put a bit of a Yiddish on it. Don't worry, it'll be okay. We'll be fine. Don't worry. And neither system is perfect and neither system is flawed. Right? In the grand scheme of things. It's like, the one country did it one way, manifest destiny. We are the world was the American version of that Christmas song. Because that's how you get to the moon. That's how you get to Mars. That's the grand explorers are, we're going to go out and we're going to kick some ass.
Yeah, every single one of those big leaps in history, though, it's really interesting. When you look at them, even Democratic leaders, they behaved very dictatorial. Mm-hmm. They took power. Like Lincoln is a very good example how he was being compared to Caesar, because you can't go and negotiate in that kind of a situation on ideological or political basis. You're the president of the United States. If you know what needs to be done and you're in the situation that it's a matter of, one wrong decision, you're gone, basically. Mm-hmm. Then you use all the power that you possibly can, and the president of the United States has a lot of power, as we're learning again in this situation with Trump.
Yeah,
signed by both Democrats and Republicans.
There's a reason it's called the Situation Room and not the what do you want to do today room.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crisis management. It's
yeah, but it's going beyond human control. That's why governments they want to have as much share as they possibly can in big tech. Everything is data and information driven. Mm-hmm. And, you look at Congress here, like 80-90% of these people were, the first years that they were in the Congress, probably even the cell phones weren't invented. So
for a lot of them, yeah.
So they have absolutely no concept of it.
Again, that's the thing, right? It's like we could have arguments about term limits. We could have arguments about all sorts of things.
It's beyond that, though. It's beyond.
But
that.
I mean, because these are all symptoms. These are all symptoms of the system we've communally agreed or had agreed upon us.
By force.
Because we've chosen for whatever reason not to explore what you were saying of going off and doing our own thing, or at least if we do it, in my situation, it's on a micro individual level, right? And I still buy into a lot of the other aspects of society, and that may change, right? Like
I think everything that exists for a reason. Not that it's supposed to exist, but it exists because of a process that has led for everything to be where it is, and it's interactive, dynamic kind of a shift that is evolving all the time, and it's the illusion of control and stability and having definitive answers and objectivity about pretty much everything that it just leads to nowhere. You end up with, like, Iran is a good example, 40 plus years of just shit, basically, based on use of force and monopolizing on violence and resources of a country. It's nothing in the context of a history, but the lives of 2 generations of people completely ruined because of it. And it's, that's just how it is.
Well, and
it is what it is. You learn from it what you can, and you apply to your own journey, and you try to apply those lessons to the rest of your life.
Yeah, from my perspective, again, the part of the reason I think a lot of people buy into a certain process is because there were promises made, and we drank that Kool-Aid. We believed in the promises that were made. And what's helped me specifically in making decisions now in my life and being very selfish, which I don't think is a bad thing, is my openness to the idea that there's no guarantee of anything for tomorrow.
Yep.
Right. I could be completely destitute tomorrow. And if I'm not okay with that on some level, I don't want it. But if I'm not okay with that possibility, then the only alternative I have is to believe other people's promises that have been incredibly unreliable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? I very much, like when I was a kid, when I was in high school, there were two passions I had in my life: science and creative writing. And science was the only one that seemed to have a career path at that phase in my life with the advice I was getting. So I followed science, and I did it for a long time, and I was very happy with a lot of it, and still am happy with quite a chunk of it. The decision I probably should have made, although should have, would have, could have, was the creative writing. Because that's the creativity, the creative writing, the passion for storytelling is, one, my happy place. It's the one thing I do that I don't ever question. Can my work be better? Yes, and I'll make it better. But it's also it's the true me, right? And what I could only see in the rearview mirror after all those years and eventually exploring the writing side, like the true storytelling side of thing, is my entire life's been storytelling. Science is storytelling. You tease things apart and then you try to put them back together to understand the narrative of life, in my case, studying the biological sciences. And even explaining what you did and what it could potentially mean is storytelling. All scientific research is storytelling. All scientific papers are a story. And
they work as much as you believe them.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. But that's also the other thing, the other aspect that hopefully might be a lesson that comes out of this COVID thing is scientists are human. They tell stories. They have biases. They have perceptions. They can't think of every angle. That's what other people are there for, to challenge you, to say, well, have you considered this? Have you considered that? To build on the science you've already created, or in that process, potentially destroy the science that came before, because it was an oversimplification more than anything, or it didn't take into account yet another factor. And so again, talking with friends, it's about, scientists struggle to say, I don't know. You'll hear sentences like, we have no evidence to suggest that. When almost no one, particularly in the public, ever goes, raises their hand and goes, Dr. Fauci, and this is not a slam on him, Dr. Fauci, is there any evidence to suggest that if I wear a mask outside, I'll be safer? No one ever phrases the question that way. They say, can I wear a mask outside? Or should I wear a mask outside? And as a scientist, he's been trained to couch his answers based on the evidence to date. And so he comes out with an answer that says, there has been no scientific evidence that suggests A, B, or C, which has nothing to do with an answer to the person's question. Should I wear a mask?
Right.
Right? The answer to that question at the best of times can only be, can't hurt. Right?
I mean, they've been doing it in Japan for a long time. If you're sick, you wear a mask, not to infect other people. It's a polite thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm totally in favor of it. But just the way that, now if you don't have a mask, you're going to be looked at like a pedophile. That's not especially like with respect to Fauci, he has business interest in a lot of this. His organization had funded that Wuhan lab that they were studying coronavirus, for 5 years after a State Department memo came out that, they're doing some stuff that are not very safe. They're not very good at taking care of what's happening there. Mm-hmm. So just like what you said, everybody have a bias, and the only way that you can get to the closest you can get to the truth is to challenge all different narrative and counter it. But the problem right now is, for example, YouTube, the CEO of YouTube come and say, everybody who says anything against the narrative that is coming from WHO, never mind how much nonsense and fake news came out of WHO that is bought and controlled by the CCP, China's Communist Party, just so obvious. But when the YouTube CEO come and say anything that comes against that narrative, we're gonna shut it down, we're gonna censor it, we're gonna remove it. Well, people are not stupid. They're gonna look for alternative explanations to have different access and different perspectives towards different kind of an information. They're not gonna be like, oh, the CEO of YouTube told me that, I'm just gonna listen to it. People are not stupid.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, you and I have talked a lot in the past about, the concept of free speech.
Yeah.
And, my argument is always, and I have no solution to the challenge, don't get me wrong, I'm the first to admit that. But it's like any speech that's muted, regardless of the topic, means you don't have free speech.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. But what that means is you got to, we're going to call bullshit on advocates for free speech who then quash other people.
Or people who are coming from the Me Too stuff who didn't waste a second bashing Trump and Kavanaugh, but now that the allegation has been made about Biden, they're like, oh, so what? Yeah, we still gonna vote for him. It was a really funny meme somebody posted on Twitter that it was a like a raccoon, I think, or a possum on top of garbage, and it was like Democrats defending Joe Biden is like, don't touch my trash. This is exactly how it is.
That one, yeah.
Insane.
Well, and that's
hypocrisy.
The thing, right? Yeah, this is always the problem with holding a placard up and espousing an ideology, but not being able to live up to that ideology, right? and I mean, do what you do. Like whoever you are, do what you do. It's who you are. But again, to exactly your point, we're going to call bullshit. We're gonna. It's just that thing of like, okay, well, why is this different?
Also,
I mean,
listen.
There's power in that simple question that comes from children. Why?
Exactly. Why and why not?
Yeah.
You need to have good answers for both of them, and both questions are very valid. Also, remember what Jesus said, that whoever is going to cast the first stone,
not that old,
make sure that you're the one who's a saint who hasn't sinned whatsoever. I don't remember the exact, but it has nothing to do.
He who is without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Christianity or
no, that's just a good philosophy.
It's common sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Common sense is not that common, dude.
Common sense.
I'm not even sure that what's out there is even sense.
But this is interesting because common sense is defined based on the value of that society.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who were supporting and defending the new atheist movement 10 years ago, now they're looking for, hey, maybe this Judeo-Christian society that has created the Western civilization is not necessarily a bad thing, because now we are dealing with an atheistic, materialistic system like the communist, the Chinese Communist Party. So a really, really interesting period really to go through, because we are challenging every aspect of who we are as individuals and as the collective, making our societies and civilization. And a lot of aspects of what we were talking about, they haven't been discussed for perhaps centuries without people being persecuted because of, just going against the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've spent most of my life being a pain in the ass to other people. I know. That is why we are brothers, right? It's that sense of, again, asking why. I mean, how did we get here? What did we like? Who signed that contract?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, and it is that thing about at an individual level, right? Of going out there and saying, what is your moral compass? What is your ethical compass? Let's start with the individual.
Yeah.
Right? What rules do you believe you should live your life by? Self-imposed rules. Only until you've got a good sense of that, I think, can you even begin to address the grander social ones, right? And it's about, like, I spent a lot of time being not just a contrarian asshole, but also apparently, in hindsight, a bit of a dick, because I decided that I knew what was good for people, and when I saw someone acting out, I would immediately sort of jump down their throat. And it was like, you know what? That's not my place.
Yeah.
Right.
I think a lot of
Um,
us been there.
yeah.
And it's
And it,
only through experiencing that you realize at some point, hopefully, that hey, like it's none of my business.
yeah. And I mean, like I think you can stand back and wait to be asked to intervene, because I was intervening in a lot of things no one asked me to intervene in. But also just in being yourself,
Yeah.
you'll find the people that gravitate towards you, right? Again, living my life in expressing my passions, in doing my photography, in writing my screenplays and my novels and my bad tweets and silly puns, and writing for the magazine and telling stories the way I like to tell stories.
Yeah.
It's amazing how my life has changed because the people around me are either working at that wavelength with me, as in they're responding positively to it, or those who don't respond positively to it have fucked off. And I'm fine with that, right? I no longer live to please others, but I find in doing so, I please a lot more than I ever used to. But that's not my reason to exist. My reason to exist is purely for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I agree to certain rules in my society, and I disagree with others. So you know what? Fuck y'all. I haven't been wearing a mask. Um, and you know what I'm doing though to try to be responsible is not going every time I pass you,
Yeah.
because I know it bothers you. I don't want to be that guy, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy, but plenty of other guys I can be. But yeah, it's like, it's I accept the responsibility for who I am. My actions, my choices, my decisions can impact others, and I have to recognize that, even if my intent wasn't to do harm, right? But by the same token, I refuse to live any other way,
Yeah.
right? It's no, I lived the other way for too long. I was miserable, you know. Bless the people that were in my life at the time, including yourself, who were there and came along with me, and we had great times. I wasn't completely miserable and suicidal, but it was about putting myself at the center of my universe, about being the person I was supposed to be, and accepting anyone who wants to come along and join the ride, and being okay with people that don't, and just saying that's cool for me. So I mean, in some respects, I think I am individually living what you espoused earlier, which is I've got my little apartment here down by the beach in Toronto. And unless you've been in Toronto, don't think too highly of the word beach. Water's cold and the air's
A
still cold,
lake
and it's
beach.
freaking May. Lake Ontario is a very cold lake. And but I'm living my own commune, right? Or whatever you want to call it. I'm living my own community, and I've got a community of people around me who share some aspects of my life and not others, and that's cool. I've got as a guy well knows, I'm a massive hockey fan, particularly for one of the teams here in Toronto, not the Leafs, and so I've met some amazing people who share that passion with me, but with whom I would never share any other aspect of my life, because they don't do that. That's not their passion. But my life is richer because I've gotten to know these people. They are good people, right? They're just as flawed and just as perfect as the next person, but we share this one thing. And so I actually feel like I belong to about 13 to 27 different communities, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And when we get off this call, I gotta eat some food, and then I'm jumping onto another call later tonight with a bunch of writers that I met at the Austin Film Festival.
Yeah.
And that's cool. We bond over being isolated introverts, and and just being creative and being silly and being insecure and being, like, but it's all very constructive. We're reading each other's work, and we're building, and we're showing, well, have you considered this? Have you considered
And if you
that?
think about it, that's how it's always been for humans. Absolute majority of them, just to sit around a fire and tell each other stories.
Yeah,
And that's
that's it.
that's it.
Yeah. Actually, if anything, I think the COVID shutdown, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, thing has actually worked to re-energize that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because look how many, I mean, you just got to be online for any length of time. And there's, right now there are probably 8,000 other Zoom chats going on,
Yeah.
whether it's two people, 28 people. I think there is something to be said for this is a rediscovering of a way to connect and sit around the fire when the entire world's burning. But
Yeah, hopefully the realization is that we've done that since the very beginning alongside with our technology.
yeah,
Because fire was a technology, the
yep,
storytelling part was a human part of it. And
yep,
so the two have evolved simultaneously, but one by its nature has the exponential evolution being technology, while humanity has a linear evolution. Now our understanding of our world is locked into a linear understanding. That's why we're caught off guard when a virus is spreading and I'm like, well, it's fine. It was 2 people today, tomorrow is 4, and then 8. That's not that big of a deal. But in 30 days, you get to 1 billion.
yeah,
Right? And it really is our biggest shortcoming. But we have to deal with this reality that, hey, technology is part of who we are. And it's a tool for us to get to our intention, to our needs. Mm-hmm. It's not that you can get rid of it because then you'll fall behind. You can't just go in the middle of nowhere without internet and you're like, I'm gonna live like Amish. No, you're gonna miss out a lot of stuff. Not that you can't do it, but you're not gonna be a functioning part of this society that is changing in a rate that nobody has experienced ever throughout our history. That's why there is no such a thing as a blueprint, some kind of a map that we know what's coming. We are truly in uncharted territories. And it's as liberating as it can be terrifying. Liberating because you just give it all up. You're like, I'm going with the stream, man.
mm-hmm.
Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all.
But again, to exactly your point, if your life is centered around, I need to know what's going to happen next Friday.
Yeah, then you're fucked.
Then you're screwed. Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, that's the agenda, like all revolution and drop off the R. The R is unimportant. All evolution is disruptive. That's the whole nature of evolution, right? It's about adapt or die. And if I thought for a second I wasn't evolving on a daily basis, on an hourly basis in some way, pack it in, right? Like, I mean, you do what you do. I'm not advocating people go off and,
no, it's the illusion of certainty and illusion of stability. It just does not exist.
Yeah.
And just because you feel like it's all falling apart, it doesn't mean that it ever existed. It just means that you believed in this illusion long enough and hard enough to see it as an inseparable part of your life and who you are. And it's an illusion.
The biggest part of my personal evolution was recognizing I had no control.
Well, it's a very good time for you to consider taking mushrooms.
For those who are uninitiated, a guy's been working on me for this one for a long time.
I mean, look, I'm not advocating it, but there are certain people who I know are going to benefit tremendously. I have another dear friend in Australia who's an architect. He will benefit from it tremendously as well. Had never experienced it, but because a lot of the stuff that we are talking about, you're experiencing that perspective in a way that you haven't experienced before, because it just removes this border between you and outside world. Like, oh, it's all one. And it's a really interesting kind of feeling. Again, I'm not advocating for anybody because I don't know where you are mentally, especially for people who've never done it. It's none of my business, and I have no interest initiating anybody. I'm just saying it's an option that exists on this planet, and it's natural.
Yep.
Right? It just grows on cow shit.
That didn't exactly make it appetizing, but
and that's why they say it's good shit.
Yeah.
That's a Bill Hicks joke.
Late
great Bill Hicks.
So how's it was even a topic of a pseudo documentary on Netflix right now.
What is?
Psychedelics.
What is it called, the documentary?
I'd have to look it up, but it's obvious. If you go to Netflix, you'll see it really quickly because it's new. It's a Netflix production. It is very tongue in cheek. It mostly just interviews comedians.
Oh, okay.
A couple like clinical scientists who are
Is
talking
it that
about.
animated show?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about Midnight Gospel?
No. This is different. But it does have
Okay.
animation. It's like an hour and a half long.
Oh, it's because I binge watched Midnight Gospel on acid.
Right.
And I was so happy that I did it. I cried with it. I laughed my ass off with it. Shows like that. The creator of Adventure Time did the animation.
I'd heard about that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Duncan Trussell, I think he originally was comedian, but again, a fellow psychonaut. It's very difficult. I keep going back to what Terence McKenna said, that living your life and not experiencing psychedelics is like living your life and not having sex. You don't know what it was all about. And
yeah, that's another really sore topic with me. But anyways. I'm really alone in this apartment.
Man, I mean, come down to Florida when the border is open. I got to tell you something really fucked up, though, because Isis, my partner's daughter, is supposed to be going to a summer camp that she goes to in northern Ontario for the past, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Anyways, yesterday, we got a call that the camp is canceled for this year because the borders are shut down.
Right.
So Kelly, my girlfriend, she called to get a refund of Air Canada. And they didn't refund anything. They didn't give her credit because they know that the borders are going to open sometimes in May, by the end of May. But nobody else knows because government has told Air Canada, but haven't told anybody. Therefore, the camp was like, oh, the borders are shut down. We're going to cancel. And she lost like a couple $1,000.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of stories about
Like
that.
what?
I've got a couple friends. Yeah.
That's the problem of having a big, centralized, corrupt, incompetent government that just put money and lobbying and special
and a big
interests.
centralized monopolist industry.
Well, how would a monopolist industry would begin with without a centralized, corrupt government that is getting money from the lobbyists and special interests, getting money from that industry?
Right, but how does the government become corrupt without those lobbyists?
Feedback loop.
Yeah, it's a total feedback loop. It's like a 8,000-year-old feedback loop.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't know. How are you feeling about?
I don't trust chickens and eggs.
Chickens and eggs.
I don't care who came first.
It was an egg.
Okay, it actually was because eggs predate chickens. So
yeah.
Well,
we solved that really quickly.
We did. See, I don't know why everybody's.
How confident are you about where Canada's headed?
Grand scheme of things, like, is the country still going to be here in 50
Well,
years,
socially, politically, and anything that you want to talk about in that context.
I'm actually really comfortable with where Canada's going. Like there are going to be bumps, don't get me wrong, and whether it's federally, provincially, urban, there are bumps and there are things we have to be vigilant of. But I think these things tend to be self-correcting over time. Does that mean they're going to correct this time? No, it's just historically they've corrected.
Right.
So I'm not incredibly worried. It's kind of like that Quebec thing I was talking about earlier, where it was like, I don't worry about it because Canada works insanely slowly. We negotiate forever. We will talk each other to death. That said, could there be an uprising tomorrow of a certain population within the country, including the indigenous, who don't feel they're represented by anything?
There are a lot of people who are getting the raw end of the deal in Canada, and they're very vocal about it, and they're now they're connected through different channels online.
The thing is, it's easy to be vocal. It's hard to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to do anything.
And welcome to Canada.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world, really.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, but there are countries that will at least shoot their presidents. Not that I'm advocating on either side of these borders.
Well, it's legal here.
Don't need to be on that list.
Constitutionally, it's legal here that if you haven't, that's the whole point of having a well-regulated militia, that if you have a tyrannical government, you have an uprising. I'm gonna tell I've always been very open about this. I'm all in favor of the Second Amendment, because when you have a country, and I think this is actually good to talk about it because it has a lot to do with this COVID situation too. When you have a country of about 330 million people, with about 360 million guns, let's say 340 million guns,
whatever,
and then you have about 30,000 gun-related death in the United States, let's say 34,000, half of which is suicide, right? About 17,000 suicide. That percentage within the number of guns in the United States is like 0.001%, something like that. It's just so little. But they're not talking about it like this. They'll be like 15,000 people died as a result of gun violence in the first half of the year. And people freak out, oh my God, 15,000. But they're not looking at the realistic context that there are 360 million guns in the United States. You cannot get rid of those guns, right? The same thing that they're doing with COVID, that they would say, oh, in Broward County, where I am in South Florida, 1,500 people have died. Everybody like, oh my goodness, 1,500 people. No, like in Florida, 1,500 people have died. In Broward County, like, I don't know, 40, 50, something like that. 200, something like that. Most of the people who've died in Florida are in Broward County and Miami-Dade. But they're not telling you that Florida has 21 million population. So the percentage is so small, but the way that they're presenting it is driven on fear and driven on freaking people the hell out. So they be like, oh, whatever kind of solution you want to give us, we're going to take it. And every single one of the solutions that's coming from the government is a raw solution because it's corrupt. It's a corrupt system. A lot of people want to get something out of it.
Sure.
I just don't think it's going to work out for that much longer.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the merit. That's percentages and what have you are the merit for not all regions necessarily having to be locked down the same way, right? Ironically, in Canada, Quebec, which as a province has the highest incidence of infection and of death, is the one that's actually sending kids back to primary school. They did it on Monday, right?
When you open it up, obviously you will have a spike of cases. But the big picture really is, and I think we're getting there slowly, to be like, hey, which one are we going to benefit from the situation more? Is it if like 100, 200,000 people die, but we reopen the economy so we can carry on? Or are we just going to shut down the economy and damage this, really ecosystem for the unforeseeable future because we want to save 100,000 lives, for example? Yep. We're getting to that point because a lot of people are going to get this virus anyways.
Yeah,
it's not like it's going to go away.
It's not, even with a vaccine.
Yeah.
So,
and what are you going to do with respect to people who don't want to get the vaccine? You see where I'm going with this?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, no, it's everything is a cost benefit analysis, or a risk benefit analysis.
Depending on the perspective.
Like, what are you willing to put up with?
Depending on the perspective who's doing the analysis.
Yeah, well, that's always the case too. Are you getting all the data? But there's no such thing as pure data. So
no,
you kind of you believe in what you believe in, and you deny what you don't believe in. And there's groups of people that will take to the streets for any particular argument, and no one wants to be reasonable. And welcome to Western society.
Yep.
And yeah, it's what comes out at the end, right? We're not going to know for decades potentially what this has been about and what the fallout of this is going to be. And we're going to have to look at what happened in every country around the world.
And it's not only the Western world, it's all over the world.
Yeah.
It's the sense of uncertainty. Maybe the only place that is not going through the same kind of instability Hey, did I lose you? Hello? Oh,
Nope. No, I'm
you're
still here.
back.
I'm still
All
here.
right.
I just haven't moved my head.
Amazing. That was funny. Maybe the most stable country at this point is North Korea because they don't have any kind of access to any kind of the information that is coming except for the status quo.
Yeah.
Right, so they can't have any other kind of a perspective, because perspective creates context. You need context to evaluate things. Without context,
yes,
nothing is good or bad, right or wrong. You know, it's like you put a ball in a road and like, is this ball moving forward or backward? Well, compared to what?
Yep. No, I agree. This is where I see the limitation of data, because it's like data without context is meaningless.
Well, that's the alignment problem in artificial intelligence that a lot of people are talking about, that the biggest issue is to align your artificial intelligence ethically with you, so it wouldn't just pursue its own goals. Now, some people are saying that AI is not going to have a goal whatsoever, but if it's going to be super intelligence, of course it's going to have biases and goals based on whatever it wants to achieve.
Yep.
But we haven't solved alignment problem again among humanity. Like in ever.
We seem to feel humans are autonomous computers. I don't understand.
Yeah.
If we could just become part of the Borg collective. Oh, wait, I said that out loud.
Well, I mean, maybe that would be the case too. But my thing is that we just don't know who we are. I certainly don't believe that we are in any shape or form a final form of anything. We're slightly better than monkeys. And I think the argument that have you paid attention to Neuralink and Elon Musk?
No.
So Neuralink.
Elon Musk drives me crazy.
Why?
He's just weird.
I love him.
Okay. I know you do.
Thank goodness that he's around, man. Him and Trump. More psychedelics, please. Neuralink is a human-computer interface to connect our brain to the machine, basically. And he was on Joe Rogan a couple of days ago, or like a week ago or something, and he was saying that I did the live stream when they announced it. It's like an hour long, more than an hour long event. But he was talking on Joe Rogan that it's going to be operational on humans, testable on humans by next year. And the whole argument is we already cyborg because of our phones. And I totally agree with that. But what we lack is the speed of inputting information that we rely on our thumb when we have electricity, basically.
Yeah.
In our brain as a way of communication. So it speeds up. It speeds up the process, and at the same time, it fixes any kind of a damage that our brain might have suffered from. So it's the next step in human evolution. Obviously, it's going to be optional because you cannot make an ethical argument and say it's going to be forced. But can you imagine that at some point babies are going to be born with this already implanted within their fetus? So they're born with it. And compare them to kids and children who are not connected to the machine. And that is the biggest point of disconnect from my perspective, that we haven't seen anything. There are going to be people who want to go beyond biological limitations, and there are going to be people who don't want to do that.
Well, we're already seeing the great divide now.
Yeah.
Because of all the homeschooling. Not everyone has the internet capacity or the computer capacity to take classes online. And so we're already seeing a division of culture in Canada. And I'm confident in the States as well, probably, of just the haves and the have-nots.
Yep.
Right? Who has access to information and who doesn't?
And now,
even without COVID, that's the case. But
COVID is an opportunity for all of us to realize the flaws of the system.
Yep.
Right. And that's my point, that I've been talking about this for months. That we have evolved alongside technology. You can't be like, I'm going to rely on ending up in heaven because I believe in Jesus, which is perfectly fine. It's just as valid as someone says, I don't believe in heaven and I don't believe in Jesus. If you believe in it, you believe in it. It's valid. But you cannot rely on that and say, hey, if a kid comes with a chip in his head that is connected to internet that don't even require going to school, At age 3, you have all the human knowledge uh, figured out, and you have it in your mind, processed, all of that. You move on to whatever the superhuman life is supposed to be. You cannot compete with that. When you're like, I'm just going to homeschool my kid.
Yep. It's a step in speciation.
It really is.
It's totally a step.
Yeah.
Because as you were talking about, like, what if the infant was implanted, and I'm like, I could actually foresee a day where the manipulation is so ingrained in the DNA that there's no chip. Yep. It just becomes a port that has been husbanded, like we create breeds of dogs and breeds of cow, that's been husbanded into that arm of human evolution.
Yeah, nanotech.
Yeah, nanotech, gene splicing, all that stuff.
That's another example that we will get at some point to the place where we can have nanobots monitoring our body from inside. Yep. Now, that's not going to be mandatory. It shouldn't be mandatory. It should be optional. Right. But your insurance company also has all the reasons to tell you, if you don't have nanobots monitoring your body, your premium is going to be 100 times as much as a person who we can communicate with all the time to see what's wrong with his body. Because
you do that with cars now.
Yeah, and like if you smoke or you don't smoke, right? Every step that they can take to determine who has a higher risk and who has a lower risk, they're going to do it. So obviously they want to do it. The biggest problem at this point is that your data shouldn't be owned by an individual government or agency or a fucking corporation like Google that they can do whatever they want to do with it. And my argument is that you should be getting paid for the data that you decide to share with any of these platforms. And that would be your truly universal basic income that is going to be decentralized.
Yep.
And intensifies on the basis of data contribution.
Just to give a really crude example of that, every time I hit the button yes or okay, when it says this site uses cookies, I should be getting something for that.
Absolutely. You should be getting something for that, which makes those companies start competing with each other to provide you a better system. So you want to work with them. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. So that is all we have to talk about. That what is happening with our data? Why don't we have ownership over it? Why are we even worried about, hey, in hyperinflation as a result of printing trillions of dollars, when we can get paid for the data? It can be our jobs. It can be people's career. That simply your job is
simply being is your job.
Yeah, being and generating data, because it's the direction that this whole world is going anyways. But allowing Jeff Bezos, for example, or Sundar Pichai of Google and Alphabet to make billions of dollars on the back of your data while you're getting zilch, that's just not something that should go on for a long time. But again, governments are losing power and becoming irrelevant, and they rely on big tech to maintain their monopolies.
Yep.
But people don't need to go along with it, and we have the tools not to go along with it now. Liberation, bro. All right, man. Let's. Cool. What is next for you, and where can people follow your work?
Okay. I've got a screenplay that I wrote for a production company. So hopefully in another year or so, I'll have a movie with my name on it. That's going to be pretty cool. Another thing where one works for a long time on faith.
Yes. And
stuff comes together eventually. But yeah, basically, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at createdbyrcw. Same on Instagram. I have a very eclectic Twitter account. So if you follow me and decide later, no, it's okay. I don't mind.
It's optional.
It's optional. And then, yeah, I'm basically on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I've got a website that you can check out called So What's Your Story, which is where I offer services for story development and helping people write their own stories, whether that's me critiquing what you've written or working with you in a coaching manner. And then I also teach, again, if you're in Toronto, although we're moving online very quickly, I teach for Raindance, which is a indie film organization. So raindance.org, I think.
Just Google Ray
And
Dance.
yeah, Google Raindance, you'll find us. And again, I'm in Toronto. So yeah, I mean, there's always something going on. My life is one adventure after another. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Let's get to the last question that I've already asked you once when I had you the
Yeah.
first time, but let's get to it again. That if you come across an intelligent alien from a different civilization, what would you say is the worst thing humanity has done, and what would you say is our greatest achievement?
I'd say our greatest achievement is still the same answer I gave all that time ago, which is the written language. I really believe the day we put something down and it was no longer just an oral tradition, because that was the beginning of the democratization of information.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you didn't belong to my tribe, you didn't hear my stories
Yeah.
before with the purely oral tradition. Once it's written down, it gets everywhere, man. So, I mean, the first person to write something down and call something an alphabet was the beginning of the internet. He was, and I assume but I could be wrong. He was DARPA before DARPA.
Seems like if you want to go back to even the root of that, you'll get to cave paintings.
Yeah, totally. Storytelling, man.
The
Storytelling
exactly.
is who we are.
Yep.
The worst. I think the worst thing we've ever done, or I don't even know if it was something we did or something we just kind of came to, and we kind of talked about it today, was the lie of tomorrow. We made, or we all mutually agreed to believe that there was a purpose beyond today. And I think what that does is it creates a bunch of people who are willing to suffer today, every today, in the hope that tomorrow will be better.
So that's the hope.
Yeah, in some respects, hope is the worst. It is the worst manifestation of humanity. It's that thing of tomorrow, great things are going to happen, or next week, or next month, or next year, or when I get to heaven. Because it completely, it can, not always, it can completely absolve people of responsibility for now.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think, I mean, twisted philosophy to try to explain it, but yes, it's I think that is actually one of the biggest challenges we have, is the assumption that we don't have to worry about today. And it's like, today's all we have. Because when it's tomorrow, it'll be today.
Not even today, right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take it in increments, though.
But I
right
mean,
now, as I say it.
That's really, I mean, it is right now, because you're bound by today and time for as long as you look at the calendar and a watch.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of it, if you don't depend on it, who cares? I'm aiming for sleeping whenever I want, waking up whenever I want, eat whenever I want. Been eating only one meal a day, have been very light and happy about it, very centered and focused. And just get rid of all the noise, man, so we can hear the music.
Yeah. I do that a lot. Actually, along those lines, I'll do that when I'm online watching something. It's amazing how many times I'm not there.
Yeah.
Like I'm missing shows that I decided I wanted to watch, but my brain goes elsewhere. It goes to tomorrow.
Well, you know, my Zen master friend in Toronto, he said, thoughts are like birds. You can't stop them from flying above your head, but you can stop them from building a nest.
Nice. I like that.
And that's all there is, man.
Yep. Because I got a brain full of bird shit.
Why? It's the point of separation when you become the observer, and then you realize you can't get rid of that dude who keeps talking inside your head. It's not you. Most of what he says are lies,
Hmm.
completely unreliable, negative bitch that just don't shut the fuck up.
In one of the groups, the men's groups I belong to, we talk about the dragon, and that's the same person, same thing.
Yeah, and you separate from it and you look at it rather
Yeah.
than being bound to respond to it.
And as far as all the other voices in my head, I just write down their stories and people buy it. So
Yeah.
I've turned I'm starting to milk them like there's so many cows in my head. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
well, you know.
Efficient and productive.
Well, you gotta like everyone who lives in my head or in my apartment has to, pay their way.
Contribute.
Yeah. Otherwise, move.